Manuel was playing joyfully with his nephew while his wife Julia stood silently nearby watching them. After a while, his sister Belen returned home and thanked him for taking care of her child for some time. On their way back home, Manuel noticed that his wife seemed upset, so he asked her if everything was all right. She replied that she wanted to have children and wondered how he could claim to be afraid of taking responsibility, while he treated his nephew with such care. She told him that they also needed children to bring life to their home. Before he could respond, a car almost hit them, and he told her that they had narrowly escaped being killed. But they quickly forgot that they were on a highway, and suddenly, a speeding truck struck them. A full year later, Manuel survived alone after his wife had passed away. From that day on, he became depressed, no longer visited his sister, and lived only with his beloved cat, which he treated as a stand-in for his departed wife. On the news, reports spoke of a new virus, and the government was awaiting test results to decide what measures to take. Even though all of Europe had closed its borders, Manuel remained unaware, thinking it was just one of the government's April Fool's hoaxes. While driving his car, he heard on the radio that people were frightened and some believed this could be the end of the world, but he paid no attention. Manuel went to sell his yacht, and several young women came to inspect it and see if it would appeal to them. When his eyes fell on one of the necklaces, he was reminded of his wife. After meeting with them, he returned home. On the way, his sister called him, but he didn't want to speak to anyone and ignored her call. He later stopped at a supermarket to buy groceries and found people in a state of panic, hoarding food just like during the COVID-19 pandemic, preparing for quarantine. When he returned home, he heard the minister on the news reassuring citizens that Spain had controlled the virus and that there were no cases in the country, but he remained indifferent. He took his wife's necklace and placed it on his cat. Then his sister called him via video chat, and he spoke with her and her son. He told her that the yacht hadn't sold yet because the women weren't interested. It was then revealed that his sister was married to a high-ranking military officer. She told him that she would travel with her husband to the Canary Islands to hide from the virus and that they would take a night flight. She asked him to join them, as they would miss him dearly, especially if quarantine were imposed and he could no longer visit. At first, Manuel did not want to live with his brother-in-law, but after his sister insisted, he agreed. The next morning, he took his car and headed toward the airport. Along the way, he saw everyone terrified and traveling. Soon, he heard on the radio that a large number of new cases had been recorded in the country and that the coming days would be difficult. It became clear that the situation had been serious from the start, but the truth had been hidden so that the wealthy could flee first, leaving the poor to face their fate, whether death or survival. It was also revealed that anyone infected with this virus could transmit it in just 3 minutes, and the infection spreads through bites or deep wounds. Manuel arrived at the airport and called his sister, telling her he had only 2 minutes left to board and that he would call her again upon arrival. But to his surprise, when he looked at the departure board, he saw that all flights had been canceled, all airlines shut down suddenly, and no one was allowed to travel or leave Spain. Everyone received emergency alerts on their phones, and a state of emergency was declared. Fear gripped the people, and chaos erupted everywhere. His sister called again, informing him of a real disaster. A new, more dangerous virus variant had emerged. She urged him to gather his belongings and return home immediately, staying there until a solution appeared. Panic spread among the crowd. Someone drew a weapon and threatened the flight attendants to be allowed to travel, further increasing the fear as everyone began fleeing. Even on the roads, cars were overturned everywhere, and streets were blocked. The news reported an attack on the naval base. Manuel decided to take his cat and return home on foot. At night, he finally reached his neighborhood and saw an ambulance pass by. He witnessed his neighbor crying over her husband, while the police held his mouth shut as he had turned into a zombie. It was then that Manuel realized the situation was indeed serious and understood, for the first time, that the virus was real. He entered his home, frightened, and sat remembering the day his wife died in that accident. The next morning, he received a video call from his sister, who informed him that Spain would not reopen its borders, meaning he would remain there until the quarantine ended. She told him they would gather everyone in a large quarantine facility, though this decision could become disastrous because the more people confined together, the higher the infection rate. She asked him to promise that he would not leave the house no matter what happened. She assured him that her husband would handle matters and find a way to bring him to them. After ending the call, Manuel heard on the news that the virus was spreading rapidly and had become a global pandemic. He began watching many videos of people attacking each other, as well as a video of a man explaining how to protect oneself from zombies. While Manuel was following the broadcasts, he received an urgent alert on his phone. A state of emergency had been declared throughout Spain. He rushed out immediately, but when he entered a major supermarket, he found it completely empty. All the goods had been looted and sold, not even cat food remained. So he quickly headed to another store to buy what he could, gathering everything he found into a bag before leaving in a hurry. As he was leaving, he saw a police officer passing by, who closed the door behind him. When Manuel looked closer, he realized that the officer had also been bitten by a zombie. As he turned, he saw another officer being bitten by a zombie without realizing it. Manuel tried to help with good intentions, but the zombie suddenly attacked him. If it hadn't been for the first officer intervening at the last moment to save him and kill the zombie, Manuel would have been bitten. Terrified, he ran back home, locked the door tightly, and began reinforcing the doors and windows with metal. Meanwhile, the president of Spain gave a speech announcing that the situation had gotten out of control. He said that trucks would arrive to evacuate citizens and that anyone who did not comply with the army's orders would face consequences. He also announced that communications and the internet would be cut off, leaving only satellite-based communication devices functional. That night, Manuel heard the army addressing people, ordering them to evacuate the city and warning that anyone refusing to leave would be breaking the law. At the same time, his sister sent him a message, warning him not to go out with the army and urging him to stay indoors and lock himself in, assuring him that they would find a way to get him out safely. A little later, the door alarm went off, and he saw soldiers climbing over the walls of houses to enter. They knocked on his door and told him they knew someone was inside and that if he didn't come out, they would break the door down. Manuel took his cat and hid under the bed, refusing to leave. They were about to break the door when an officer called them off and ordered them to withdraw. 2 full weeks passed. Manuel called his sister and told her he would have to leave the house because he had run out of food. He hoped his message would reach her, knowing that the internet and communications were cut off. Nevertheless, he continued sending messages because he was used to talking to her and preferred that over talking to himself. After that, he took his cat, put on a diving suit for protection against zombie bites, and carried his hunting rifle. Then he went out. He began entering people's homes in search of food but found nothing. He checked one house, then another, then a third, all without success. Finally, he entered a house and found an elderly woman still inside. When she saw him, she said she had nothing and told him not to tire himself. She explained that her son and his wife had taken the children and gone to hide them somewhere, promising to return for her, but she hadn't seen them since. She then offered him a solution. She would show him the houses that still had food, and since he was young, he could enter, steal the food, and bring it back to them. Manuel agreed. He moved from house to house as she had shown him, but still found nothing useful for them. Then she sent him to another house, saying that this one would have the food they needed. However, when he entered, he found nothing again, except a motorcycle, which he admired and decided to take so he could move quickly between houses. Manuel traveled through the entire neighborhood, collecting all the food he could find. But when he returned home, he realized he had brought back only a few jars, barely enough to satisfy hunger or fill the stomach. Finally, he entered one last house and found it full of food, filling him with joy. At night, they prepared dinner and sat together, eating and talking. Afterward, Manuel sent another message to his sister, telling her about the neighbor he had found, expressing how much he missed her and hoped to see her and her son. Even though he knew the message would likely never reach her, he sent it out of habit. He then returned home. The next morning, his neighbor called him on the landline and asked him to turn on the radio to listen to an important message. As soon as he did, he heard news instructing all people to head to Arousa Bay, where they would later be transported to the Canary Islands. Manuel spoke with the elderly woman and asked her, "What do you think? Our food is running out." She replied that she didn't know what to say and added that she couldn't go with him because she would tire him on the way. He reassured her not to worry, promising that he would carry her on the motorcycle and take her there, never abandoning her. He told her he would come for her the next morning. The following morning, Manuel went to her house and called out for her, but she did not respond. Anxiety began to creep in. When he entered, he found a note she had left for him, thanking him for everything he had done for her over the past days. As he looked closer, he realized she had rested forever. She had ended her own life. Manuel felt intense shock and sorrow as he grasped that she had committed suicide. Yet he had no other choice. He left her body behind and departed. Suddenly, a zombie attacked him, determined to bite him. Manuel tried to fend it off, but his rifle fell, forcing him to fight hand-to-hand until he struck it with a car window. Still, the zombie did not fall until it bit him. Had he not been wearing his protective diving suit, the infection would have reached him long ago. Finally, he managed to kill it and save himself. Manuel remained sad and pained, burdened by the state humanity had reached and the necessity of killing the infected. Afterward, he returned home and, as usual, spoke with his sister, telling her he had heard the radio message and would do his utmost to reach them in the Canary Islands. He mounted his motorcycle, sped off, carrying his cat with him, and headed straight for the city's outskirts. However, he found the road blocked, so he considered an alternative path through the forest. He soon regretted the decision. As he entered the woods, he made noise, alerting every zombie in the area, all of them chasing him. They were countless, each racing to be the first to devour him. Manuel drove at maximum speed to escape them until he reached a road littered with corpses, causing him to fall. When he got up to continue, the motorcycle refused to start, and the zombies were closing in. He grabbed his cat and ran with all his strength until he reached the port. There, he was met with another shock. His yacht was gone, and the entire port was empty. Nevertheless, he did not give up. He entered a fishing supply store and gathered what he needed. Soon after, he spotted a small yacht, left his cat behind, and swam to it. Upon boarding, he heard a sound inside and was startled to find a small child who had turned into a zombie. Manuel hesitated but was forced to kill the child to end its suffering. When he tried to start the yacht, it wouldn't work, so he took a small inflatable boat instead and set off. He continued sending messages to his sister, telling her he was close to reaching the Canary Islands and thanking her for the guidance she had given him. He also informed her that the places where the army had been transporting people for quarantine had been completely overrun by zombies. Manuel continued on his path until nightfall. Shortly afterward, Manuel noticed that the inflatable boat had completely stopped. When he tried to start it, it wouldn't respond. He realized that the engine was stuck on one of the corpses underwater. He sat there, confused, unsure of what to do, until he spotted a ship passing nearby. He began shouting for help, and they heard him and stopped, allowing him to climb aboard. Most of the people on the ship didn't speak Spanish, except for one man who understood him and translated. His name was Victor. Manuel told them he wanted to head to the Canary Islands and asked if there were any survivors in the area, but they all lied and told him he was the only one left alive. They then left him alone with Victor, who explained that he hadn't told them Manuel was a lawyer because they were pirates and might have killed him if they knew. Instead, Victor had told them that Manuel was an engineer. Victor added that he himself was a pilot from Ukraine. Manuel thanked Victor for saving him and not handing him over to the pirates. Victor told him that he would need him early in the morning and asked him to wake up to guide them to locations in Spain. Manuel then went to his room with his cat. Shortly afterward, he heard screams outside and, looking out, saw people on another ship that was sinking. The next morning, Manuel asked Victor what had happened to the people he had seen the previous night. Victor denied it, saying, "What people are you talking about? No one came yesterday but you." He warned him, "Keep quiet if you want to live." Then he informed Manuel that the captain wanted to speak with him. When he entered the captain's room, Manuel began explaining the locations in Spain on the map, as they were searching for places with weapons and food. After he left, Manuel saw the men gathering weapons, as well as the very boat where he had seen people the previous night. He realized they had lied to him and had saved those people while hiding something dangerous from him. While exploring the ship, Manuel saw a man guarding a closed door. The moment the man noticed Manuel, he shouted at him to stay away. Manuel sensed something suspicious and went to Victor, asking him directly what was going on. Victor again told him to stay silent, warning that speaking could put them all at risk. Despite this, Manuel continued trying to convince him, revealing that he knew Victor was involved with the pirates. He suggested they escape using a plane at the military base and fly to the Canary Islands, where his sister and her husband could help them. While they were talking, a pirate suddenly entered and asked what Manuel was doing there. Victor quickly pushed him away, claiming Manuel was only discussing work with him. Manuel returned to his room, put on his diving suit, hid his cat in a bag to prevent any noise, and began trying to sneak quietly to escape the ship. But as he was leaving, he remembered the door that had raised his suspicions and decided not to go until he knew what was behind it. His suspicions were justified. Behind the door, he found a group of people tied up on the floor. He realized that the ship's captain had lured these people there under the pretense of rescuing them. But in reality, he intended to kidnap them and steal their weapons and food. Manuel also discovered that the captain had kidnapped one man's wife and daughter. Before he could escape, one of the pirates entered and killed the man coldly and without mercy. As the pirate moved to kill Manuel and his companion, Victor suddenly appeared, struck him, and saved them. Victor then told Manuel he needed to be honest about the plane, because if they couldn't find it, they wouldn't be able to escape. The three of them fled together, boarding a small boat. But Victor surprised Manuel by killing the man who had been with them. Immediately, the pirates opened fire on Victor, hitting him in the shoulder. Nevertheless, Manuel managed to escape with him and reach the shore, and they continued on together. Soon after, they saw cars parked nearby and began searching for one that worked. They found one and drove straight to a nearby hospital. On the way, Victor told Manuel that the pirate had no heart or mercy. He had exploited the virus to build an empire on the coast, kidnapping people, sorting out those useful to him for work, while robbing or killing the rest, and taking women he liked. Manuel said that things had to return to normal and that the man should be punished and put in jail. Victor mocked him, saying, "Do you still think the world will go back to how it was? This is the end of the world." When they arrived at the hospital, a large group of zombies attacked them. Manuel had to use his weapon and shoot them. He then brought Victor inside for treatment, although he didn't know how to remove the bullet from his shoulder. While searching for the necessary tools, he heard children's voices upstairs. Curiosity drove him to go up, and he began searching until he located the source of the sound. He called to them and asked where they were hiding. They told him they were downstairs, and he also heard the voice of an elderly woman with them. He spoke with her, explaining that his friend was in the operating room, had been shot in the shoulder, and needed help. While talking to her, a zombie suddenly attacked him, but he pushed it back and shot it immediately. However, the gunshot attracted all the zombies who charged toward him. Without thinking, he grabbed his weapon and started running until he reached the lower floor. When he arrived, he found neither Victor nor his cat, but a girl crying, who asked him to come in quickly. They entered together and closed the doors behind them before the zombies could reach them. There, Manuel found Victor and his cat, while Lucia asked Cecilia to help save Victor before he died. At first, Cecilia was hesitant, but she eventually agreed, and Victor was not left to perish. Manuel sat with his cat and noticed the children wanting to play with it. He offered them the cat, and they joyfully played with it. After a while, he approached Lucia to check on Victor and thank her, telling her he had come there for the plane. Lucia replied that a plane would take him to the rooftop and that a helicopter would also be available. She explained that the place had been used to quarantine people infected with the virus from the healthy, but everyone inside had turned into zombies. Manuel asked if there was a secret path to reach the helicopter. She told him the place was full of zombies and that if they hadn't had weapons, their fate would have been the same. She added that the room in Lockup led directly to the courtyard, but the explosion heard the previous night made the path dangerous for the children. That evening, They all sat together, and Lucia told them that their food was running out. Manuel told her that his wife had died in this hospital and recounted the incident that had happened on the way. He then went to the room where his wife had died, reminisced, held his cat, cried, and took her food, tying it to the bed where she had died before leaving. When he reached the rooftop, he was surprised and pleased that the network worked. He was finally able to access the videos his sister had sent, reassuring him that everyone was okay. But suddenly, he heard the pirate and his men approaching. He quickly spoke with the girls, telling them they needed to escape and enter lock-up to reach the plane before it was too late. Victor regained consciousness, and each of them took a piece of a weapon to protect themselves from contamination. When they reached the door, they couldn't open it because the metal had warped from the heat, so they had to break it with an axe. Suddenly, a zombie leaped directly onto Cecilia. Manuel and Lucia tried to save her, but unfortunately, the zombie bit her and killed her. She told them to continue and take care of the children. At that moment, one of the girls saw her mother, who had turned into a zombie, and began crying. Manuel calmed her down, gathered the children, tied them together for protection from the zombies, and they walked a safe distance. Suddenly, zombies attacked again, forcing them to fight fiercely before finally reaching the door. Lucia grabbed the axe and opened the door so they could move toward the plane. Unfortunately, the helicopter did not start immediately. Manuel went down, killing the zombies that were sneaking toward them one by one. But the problem was not only the zombies. The captain and his men had arrived at the same moment. Finally, Victor started the helicopter, but the pirate threatened him with a gun, forcing him to descend. Manuel signaled him to stay silent, and Victor flew the helicopter. Manuel moved among the zombies to protect himself. The zombies attacked the captain and his men, killing them, while Victor flew the helicopter. Lucia threw a weapon to Manuel, and they finally managed to escape after all the struggle. Shortly afterward, Manuel called his sister, reassuring her that he was still alive and close to the island. But she screamed at him, urging him to return to Spain quickly. At that moment, they saw warplanes heading toward the island and realized that the entire island had turned into zombies and that the planes were coming to burn and kill them. And thus the film ended, marking the conclusion of the story.